gospel can be intimidating because it gives us a completely new and different way of judging the sort of life we should lead in order to grow closer to God. Jesus tells us in no uncertain terms what is required for us to enter the kingdom of God. Simply put, we need to perform acts of service to those less fortunate than we are. And today's gospel gives us specific examples that define those who are less fortunate. Jesus not only defines those less fortunate, but also offers his own actions as an example of how a true believer should act. You see, Jesus represents the ideal human being, the very best example of what we as human beings can be. On the cross, Jesus became the greatest example of self-sacrifice, a sacrifice that he freely accepted out of love. Not for a few people, not for one race, or one country, or one religion, but for all mankind, for every human being in history. As a result of his actions, Jesus changed our relationship with God and now represents Jesus gave us a new way of looking at our relationships with each other. He taught us to measure ourselves by our service to each other, especially our service to those in most need. And we have vivid examples of this service right here in our own parish. The economy of the last several years has put more individuals at financial risk than at any other time in recent history. Hunger and nakedness may not be staring at us on every corner, but we know there are brothers and sisters among us who are in need. People living on the edge, living from day to day, trying to feed their families and keep a roof over their heads. If you think it doesn't exist in our midst, ask members and volunteers at our St. Vincent de Paul food pantry or at our thrift store. They do wonderful work meeting the immediate needs of those fitting Jesus' description in today's gospel. Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, welcoming the stranger. Just as an aside, next week our food pantry will feed 300 families out of that little pantry at the end of the hall. The average family is comprised of 4 members. Do the math. How many souls do they touch? The ill and those in prison, the ill and those in prison present another challenge, not just for us, but for our society as a whole. Today's gospel asks us to consider how our actions might make their lives better. You know, perhaps we can't accomplish the immediate results that Jesus did when he healed the sick as they stood in front of him. But like the first disciples sent out to continue his work, we are called to demonstrate our concern by visiting the sick and those in prison. A real challenge indeed. So on this feast of Christ the King, we come to realize that Jesus is a different kind of king than an earthly king. On this feast day, Jesus challenges us to transform our lives into lives of service and compassion, something that is very difficult given the values prevalent in our society and culture. If we truly want to become more Christ-like, we need to be compassionate and willing to sacrifice and serve others. We need to be motivated not by personal gain, but by care and concern for our neighbors, especially those less fortunate. Today, all across the United States, parishes are praying together for the last time using the words of the current Roman Missal. Next week, some of the words in the Mass will change, and over time, we will become accustomed to the new translation. During this transition, it is important that all of us remember why we are here. Next week, some of the words may be different, but Jesus will remain at the heart of our celebration. It is important to remember that whenever we celebrate Holy Mass, the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ. The Eucharist, the source and summit of our Catholic faith. That's why we are here. At the same time, we should also remember that Christ is truly our King.